We interrupt this record to bring you a special bulletin. The reports of a flying saucer hovering over the city have been confirmed.
Did you really go out with an alien? Uh-huh. What was it like? Real different.
Becoming Human, a Mork and Mindy podcast. Hello, listeners. This is Paula Schaffner with episode 87, Cheerleader in Chains. This first aired on April 22nd, 1982. The IMDb synopsis is, Mindy is held in contempt of court for refusing to reveal a source of news. And no, she's not actually chained up. Her being a cheerleader in high school doesn't come up directly, but the implication here is that Mindy is very wholesome and not the sort of person that you'd expect to go to jail, and also in some ways she's led a very soft life. According to IMDb, this was the 13th episode directed by Bob Claver, but when I was watching the episode today, it said that it was directed by Ed Greenberg. So I don't know what was going on there. The teleplay was by Winifred Hervey, who wrote Present Tense, which was another episode that had a lot about Mindy. And this was based on a story by Cindy Beagle and Lisa Kite, so this is their fourth Mork and Mindy episode. There's a sunny exterior of the house, now with flowers blooming, so we're definitely into the spring. Mindy, Mirth, and Fred enter the front door to applause, including whistles. Mindy's hair looks very permed. She's wearing a tan blouse and brown slacks. Mirth is in overalls as usual. Fred is wearing gray slacks, a black sweater, a colored white shirt, and a gray cap, which he takes off. So this is a more casual look for Fred. Mirth twice says that Daddy got his license. Then he says, okay, you lost Grandpops, fork over. Fred sighs and hands Mirth the bill out of his wallet. So they had a little bet about Daddy getting his license. So we did get a carryover from the Drive She Said episode, and there's a bit on the previous episode about Mindy testing Mork on his driving knowledge in bed 4 times in one night. This is actually some continuity. Fred says, Mork driving, who could believe it could happen here? And I don't know if that's like a reference to it can't happen here, like this is as awful as fascism coming to America, but it's definitely not something that Fred is happy about. Fred keeps thinking a stiff wind 4 years ago and Mork would have landed in Kentucky. I don't think the eggs are actually affected by wind, but again we see that although Fred likes Mork, he still kind of wishes that Mork had never come into their lives. Mindy says, come on, Dad. Mork went out, set a goal for himself, and he achieved it. She thinks that Fred should be proud of him. Fred says, proud? He says Mork just drove out of a gas station with the attendant still under the hood. Mirth says that made him laugh, and he grins. Fred chuckles. And again, there's this thing of Conrad Janis is supposed to be looking stern as Fred, but he can't help being amused by Jonathan Winters or Robin Williams. Mork enters wearing his aviator cap and scarf. The applause includes whistles and cheers. Mork laughs triumphantly, takes off his scarf, and whirls it around. Then he takes off his cap. He says he's free. He's got mobility now. He has his license. The key to, forgive my French pronunciation, joie, J-O-I-E. I'll just say right now, this whole thread of Mork having his license is capping off what we got in Drive She Said, but it's a subplot that's sort of dropped, not entirely, but that's not what this episode is about, obviously. But the thing about freedom, that Mork now has his driver's license, and that gives him a certain sense of freedom, and Mindy is about to lose her freedom. Mork says he can finally take that just married sticker off of his bicycle. It was so hard dragging all those cans all these days. Mindy laughs. And of course, Mork did not go off on his honeymoon on a bicycle. He and Mindy traveled in an egg, but maybe he misunderstood Earth customs and he thought you're supposed to put the sticker and tin cans on some kind of vehicle. Fred grabs Mindy's arm and pulls her aside. He says, honey, look, don't think of me as your father. Think of me as your savior. You can't turn that maniac loose on the highway, meaning Mork. She puts her hands on her hips and asks him to have a little faith in Mork. She says Mork didn't try to discourage Fred when he took up karate. This is again this thing like Mindy doing origami. There are these odd references to never seen hobbies. She goes over to Mork, who takes her hands and says, oh, bless you, my little support system. He says it would be a red letter day for him if he hadn't taken such a lousy license picture. And we don't get a description, we don't see it, we just have to imagine that he got a bad picture on his license, because that's a cliche that sometimes happens in real life, of course. Mirth says amidst all this excitement, he's written a poem. He takes out a piece of paper. Fred looks amused, and then when Fred wants to look at the paper, Mirth tells him not to read it. Fred shakes his head. The poem is called My Dad by Mirth McConnell. It goes, "Now that my dad can drive and change a flat, please don't run over my new cat." And I think this is at least the second reference to Mirth having a pet cat that we don't actually see. Mork goes to him and twice says, "Bless you." He says that was wonderful. He loved Mirth's imagery and his meter. Mirth looks flattered. Mork says it was kind of reminiscent of Ubi and Robert Blake. I looked this up. Ubi is spelled U-B-I-E in the subtitles. I can't find any reference to a poet with that name. And Robert Blake, I assumed, was a reference to the star of Beretta. And maybe it's supposed to be funny that Mork meant to say William Blake, but that joke didn't really make sense to me. Someone knocks and Mindy answers.
Oh, hello.
Hi, I'm Bob Miller, your neighbor from across the street.
Oh, hi.
I seem to have gotten some of your mail. You are Mindy McConnell, aren't you?
Oh, yeah. Oh, and this is my husband, Mork.
Oh, howdy. Hi, Bob. I've seen you. When are you going to take down those Christmas lights?
Wait a minute. This is a subpoena.
That's right.
Wow. Hey, isn't that great, Bob? What a kind of guy you are. Why don't you come over tomorrow, wear some shorts, stand by a fire, and have a weenie roast?
You said you were our neighbor.
Well, I am. I do live right across the street. By the way, can I borrow your rake?
Oh, sorry you have to be going, neighbor.
Bob Miller was played by Paul Wilson, who was then 36. He had previously appeared on a terrible episode where he thought that Mork was a priest and he confessed that he wanted to commit suicide. I assume it's a different character, although that character was nameless. This was less than a year before Paul Wilson would start to appear on 55 episodes of Cheers. The Gary Shandling show was beyond that. He does a nice job of holding it together, even when Robin Williams makes the weenie roast joke, which is pretty suggestive, and you can hear the audience processing it and then reacting. This is his only appearance in the episode. There's not any further reference. The character just serves this purpose, and then he's done. I thought it was interesting that Mindy introduces Mork as her husband, but doesn't mention Fred or Mirth. There's a reference to the Christmas lights still being up, and it's not clear exactly when this episode is set. I mean, obviously, it's not winter, but we don't know beyond that. Bob is oblivious that this is not a neighborly thing to do, and he thinks he can borrow their rake, and so of course Mindy kicks him out. After she closes the door, Mork tells her that she can't treat people like that. If she does that, the neighbors will be walking their dogs on the McConnell's lawn. And there will be a reference to a dog later in the episode, but I don't think it's because she was not neighborly to Bob Miller. The family stands close together as Mindy unfolds the letter. Fred calls her honey and asks what this is about. She says she doesn't know, but then she realizes as she reads through the subpoena. As she walks over to the couch and Mork follows, she says that they want her to testify about the story she broke on the Hidden Springs Highway scandal. She tells her dad that he remembers that one. Mork and Mindy sit very close on the couch. She says it was when the road crew told her that the contractor was skipping on the safety codes and paying the state inspectors to look the other way. So this is obviously something that she discussed with her dad, which seems in character for her. She'd just like to tell him how things are going with her career and in the important stories. Fred says, and now he supposes that they want her to tell who supplied the information. And she says, Mirth tells Mommy he hopes she's not going to release the name of the informant. She should stand on the First Amendment and her rights as a journalist. They all look at him because he's supposed to be a young child and he's speaking very eloquently about this issue. And he says, too strong? He says it's okay when Lou Grant says it. And he says he can identify with Lou Grant because they've got matching bodies. Fred smiles. And that's, of course, a reference to the Ed Asner character who began on the sitcom Mary Tyler Moore Show and then continued onto the drama Lou Grant, which would be on the air for another few months. Both Jonathan Winters and Lou Grant were portly men. Mindy can't believe they would ask her to betray confidence like that. If it wasn't for her, they wouldn't have the story in the first place. And it's unclear who they is. I assume it's the local legal authorities, but it's sort of implying that KTNS is throwing her under the bus. Fred calls her honey and says he respects her principles, but haven't journalists gone to jail for standing on the First Amendment? He sits on the couch armed by Mork. She says, "Oh, Dad, this is just a little construction scandal, not the Pentagon Papers." And that's a callback to a set of documents that Daniel Ellsberg released in 1971 and was an important moment in freedom of the press. Mindy doesn't think they're going to do anything to her. Mindy is very idealistic. In this episode, she's kind of naive. Her father is more aware of how the world works. He admires her principles, but he's also a protective father. And Mindy thinks that because it's such a small local scandal, it's not going to have any big consequences.
This is Newsline, and I'm Larry Carroll. Today, KTNS reporter Mindy McConnell was cited for contempt of court and jailed for refusing to reveal her news source in the Hidden Springs bribery trial. In other news, finalists prep for the Miss Nude Colorado contest, film at 10.
After so many uses of the shot of the KTNS studio up in the mountains surrounded by snow, we suddenly get a completely different look at it. It definitely is a warmer time of the year and doesn't look like it's particularly up in the mountains. We can see that the local news break is called Newsline, and it is hosted by Larry Carroll. He was then 31. He was an anchorman at KABC in Los Angeles for many years and often played news anchors in movies and TV. We can see that Mindy's arrest is being played for laughs, like how she is interacting with the character that we'll find out is the matron and how she looks at the camera. Even though she's been arrested, we're not really supposed to worry about her at this point. And there's a reference to a beauty contest called Miss Nude Colorado. And Larry promises film at 10. Then we get an exterior of the jail with palm trees. Now this episode will actually have something shot on location for an exterior, but this one, they didn't even bother. Then we get an interior of the jail. It looks pretty much like any other jail on a sitcom of that time. The outer door slides open. The matron leads in Mindy and tells her, "All right, come on, sister, move it." She's got her hand on Mindy's arm, and this is an echo, unconscious or not, of Fred putting his hand on her arm in the first scene. I'll just tell you right now that the matron is played by Judy Pioli, who was then 32. She was an actress and writer, particularly for Laverne and Shirley, and she's still alive as of this recording, but she's no longer in showbiz. She often played sort of tomboy or butch characters on Laverne and Shirley and Happy Days in particular, and so this role is sort of like that, although she does some little twists on it, and sometimes she would play brunette characters and sometimes blondes, as here, although the hairdo looks very different than, for instance, Terry Buttafuoco on Laverne and Shirley. Mindy is wearing a gray prison smock, but she's got a plum-colored sweater draped over her shoulders. Mindy says she's never been in jail before. As the matron opens the cell, she says, "Yeah, life's tough. I've never been to France." From a different angle, we can see an older woman sitting on a bench, and she's wearing the gray smock, but with the gray turtleneck underneath. The matron puts her hand on her hip as she waits for Mindy to go into the cell. Mindy says, "Excuse me, but there's somebody else in there," and she wants a single cell. So again, Mindy has led a sheltered life. The matron says, "Toots, this is jail, not the Love Boat." So a very 40s kind of tough term, toots, but then a reference to the Love Boat, which was still in the air at that time. Like she's saying that you can't have a stateroom of your own. She tells Mindy to get in, and she takes Mindy's sweater away as Mindy enters the jail cell. Then she slides the cell door closed. Mindy asks her to wait because she has one last question. She wants to know if her things are going to be all right, and she says that's a very expensive sweater. She doesn't want it put on a hanger. The matron says, "Don't worry about it, honey. I'll only wear it on weekends." Then she throws it over one shoulder and exits. The older woman stands and says hello, so Mindy says hi.
Oh, you poor dear child. I know just how you feel. Now you come right here and you sit down. Would you care for a Snickers?
Oh, no, thank you.
Suit yourself. I was just trying to be friendly.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's just I've never done time before. I've never even been grounded. I'm Mindy McConnell.
And I'm Louise Bailey.
Hi.
My, but you are a cutie.
Oh.
What in the world are you doing in a hellhole like this?
I don't know. I didn't think things were going to work out like this. But my lawyer called and she said I should be out in a few hours.
It's funny the way things happen.
Yeah.
I'm in here because of a silly old parking meter.
You're kidding.
No, I went into a hardware store, and when I came out, there was a policeman writing me a ticket.
I don't believe it. They threw you in jail for a parking ticket?
Well, in a roundabout way. You see, when I put the shovel in the trunk, Walter's arm fell out.
Who's Walter?
My husband.
Well, what was he doing in the trunk?
Not much. He was dead. I warned him about his snoring for years, but he just wouldn't believe me. So last night, I took a pair of my very best pantyhose and I wrapped them around his neck real tight. You know, it was the first good night's sleep I've had in 31 years.
Well, you look well rested.
You don't snore, do you, dear?
No!
Mrs. Louise Bailey is played by Barbara Billingsley. She was very recognizable then and for a long time afterwards as Mrs. Cleaver on Leave It to Beaver. Oddly enough, she had taken a break, didn't act much in the 70s, but she started to come back recently, including playing the Jive Lady in Airplane in 1980. Her first role was as a blonde with hives in So You Think You're Allergic from 1945, and her last role was in Secret Santa in 2003. She was 66 at the time and actually lived until 2010. She is very much playing with and against her Mrs. Cleaver role. And so she talks very sweetly, but then she says hellhole, and she turns out to be a murderer. We find out that Mindy has never even been grounded, which is surprising because Fred seems like he was pretty strict, but Mindy was a good girl. I thought it was interesting that Mindy refers to an unseen female lawyer, who she says will get her out in a few hours. And they could have had a thing where Mindy talked to her lawyer, even if the lawyer was just on the phone and not seen. But it's just a throwaway thing, so we know that she has a lawyer who's working on it. But I thought it was a nice touch that they made the lawyer female. We find out that the reason why Louise killed her husband Walter was because he snored, and Mindy denies snoring, and we have heard before, including in the previous episode, that Mindy does snore. The matron lets Mork into the hallway, but she doesn't come in herself, and then she shuts the outer door. Mork calls Mindy his poor prison pooter, so variation on little pooter, and he also calls her his little San Quentin quail. I gasped at that joke, which I don't think anybody in the audience gets. San Quentin quail is old slang for jailbait, and Groucho's character in the 1940 movie Go West plays on this. They barely got that past the censor, and obviously Robin Williams just slipped that in. Mork refers to the anguish and the degradation, but he says it's a cute little dress. She tells him that she feels so humiliated, even though she knows what she's doing is right. She tells him that they took everything, her clothes and her wedding band. They fingerprinted her and took mugshots. There's a cut to Louise doing a jigsaw puzzle on her bunk, so just looking very innocent. Mindy whispers to Mork that that woman told Mindy that she murdered her husband.
Murdered her husband? Come on, she looks like Mrs. Cleaver.
As with the They Earned It on the John Houseman episode, you do have to have an overt reference to Mrs. Cleaver, and so the audience really appreciates that. Mindy asks how Mirth took it, meaning took the news that she was going to jail. I don't know how much time passed, obviously enough time for her to get a lawyer and appear in court and then lose the case. Mork says that Mirth cried a lot. He kept saying, "Mama's in the can," meaning jail, not a bathroom. Mork says then Mirth packed all her stuff in boxes and he moved into the bedroom with Mork. Mindy says to tell Mirth to unpack because Mindy will be out in a few hours. Mork carried some things in and he says these are things for her just in case she's in there longer. He hands them to her one by one. Cigarettes to bribe the screws, slang for the guards. Facial cream for an older woman, and I think he means for Mindy if she stays long enough, although I guess it could be a bribe for Mrs. Bailey. And a harmonica, because the cliched thing of prisoners playing harmonicas. There's another cut to Louise and the jigsaw. The matron returns and says visiting hours are over.
Let's go, Shorty.
You got it, Butch.
I miss you already.
I miss you too, Min. Oh, and lady, don't you worry. She makes a real good roommate. And don't let her snore and keep you awake at night.
That was a joke. He was kidding. I don't snore. As a matter of fact, I don't even sleep.
The audience really likes the Butch comment, and this is one of several moments in the episode where the audience just really loved one of Robin's lines. And I don't know if it's an ad-lib, but it's delivered in such a way that you feel like he, or at least Mork, is getting away with something. Like I said, Judy Pioli has kind of a Butch image. The implication, of course, especially because this is prison, is that he's saying she's a lesbian, and so that seems really outrageous to them. Mork and Mindy say that they'll miss each other, and Mork mentions that Mindy snores, and Louise looks quietly menacing. We don't know what happens with that. We will find out more about Louise later, but she's not in the next scene in jail. There's another daytime exterior of the house with flowers blooming. Inexplicably, Mork has a clothesline in the kitchen of puppets and stuffed animals, including Merce Teddy. There's a lot of moments in this episode that I felt were maybe referring back to earlier drafts. They just go unexplained. I'll talk about this more later, but I actually ended up liking that. At first I was like, well, what about this and what about that? And there are things that definitely don't come together. But for a change, I actually kind of like the randomness of this episode. Mirth enters the front door sobbing. He's wearing a red baseball cap, a red and white Hawaiian shirt, blue Bermuda shorts, mismatched athletic socks, and red sneakers. So rather than the usual overalls, he's dressed more like it's a very warm day. Part of this, I think, is to show that the seasons are changing, but it's also because we're able to see that he has a sore on his right leg above his knee and below the hem of the shorts. The audience awes in sympathy. Merce says daddy 3 times. Then he says it's such a long step, meaning the step that's by the door that leads down to the living room. Mork goes to him and calls him son. He takes his arm and asks what's the matter. Merce says, what do you mean what's the matter? Can't you see? Mork wants Mirth to sit down so he can take a look at the boo-boo, but Mirth scoffs at the word boo-boo. He said a doggy bit him, then a kitty bit him, then a gray squirrel. It doesn't say the gray squirrel bit him, but I assume so. So like I said, there is a reference to a dog and a cat. He says, then Tommy Leonard hit him with a bat. That doesn't look like a bruise from a bat, but okay. He cries in pain as he sits on the stool. Mork asks what Mirth did to make all these people angry. So it's like, oh, he's blaming the victim. But I couldn't really be annoyed with him because it kind of felt like, yeah, what did he do? Because Mirth remains a brat. And Mirth doesn't say, hey, I'm your kid, people and animals are picking on him. No, he demonstrates making a face with his tongue stuck out. So apparently that was enough to make a dog, a cat, and a squirrel, as well as Tommy Leonard, angry enough to hurt his leg in the exact same spot. Mork looks at the boo-boo, but he almost faints at the sight of blood. Then he goes in the bedroom. Merce says Mork has to set an example for him, I think meaning be brave. And that sounded like a Jonathan Winters ad-lib. And then there's a sound of Mork quickly vomiting in the bedroom. Mirth calls to Daddy. And then Mork hurries back in with a first aid kit. So I guess he gagged and then ran into the bathroom and then came back into the living room. Mork tells Mirth not to worry. Mirth screams as Mork puts on ointment. Mork screams in sympathy. Mork starts to say something about the dog biting Mirth, but Mirth interrupts him to say, it's his sore, let him do the ows. And then he says, ow! So that felt like another ad-lib. Mork starts over and says if a dog bit Mirth, they've got to get a rabies shot for him. Mirth says he was kidding about that. The doggy and the kitty didn't bite him. What about the squirrel? So he was asking for more sympathy than he deserved by making up these animals attacking him. Then he says Bobby Leonard did hit him with a bat. Just a couple minutes ago, it was Tommy Leonard. Then Mirth objects to Mork putting a Band-Aid on.
And she always puts a... Listen, one thing, kid. Your mommy's in the slammer right now, busting rocks and breaking out license plates. So I'm the best you got, and you better deal with me the way you have me right now. Oh, what am I talking about? I miss mommy, too.
Boy, you need some sedation.
So we see Mork having to get tough while he's raising this child on his own. Then he becomes more sensitive and upset. He says he misses mommy too. In this episode and the previous one, there are things about the family missing each other, although for very different reasons. I generally don't find Jonathan Winters funny, but I did like the sedation line because it felt like the right reaction to Robin Williams overreacting. Mork asks his son for forgiveness, and then he goes over to the couch. Mork stands and says, "Can't you even think of helping me?" He tries to walk, but his leg is stiff and he is worried about gangrene. Mork comes closer and guides his son over the couch. Mirth groans in pain, including when they sit down. Mork asks if Mirth is feeling better now, and Mirth says he is, so pretty quick recovery. Someone knocks, and Mirth thinks it's the doggy or maybe Bobby Leonard. Fred lets himself in, and Mirth covers one knee protectively and then both knees, even though it's clearly his grandfather. Mork stands, and Fred says he's afraid he has some bad news. Mork is worried that something happened to Gene Rayburn. Fred says, "No, Mork." Mork says, "Oh, thank God," and Mork sits down again. Gene Rayburn was the host of various incarnations of Match Game. The one that is best known was just wrapping up that year. Just one of those random celebrities that Mork likes to refer to. But we do know he loves TV, so that makes sense that he would enjoy the Match Game. Fred sits on the couch arm again and says that the judge has denied Mindy's petition for release. She could be locked up for quite a while. I guess Fred either went to the hearing or he visited Mindy in jail and found this out. I don't know why Mork didn't go, but maybe he couldn't get a sitter for Mirth at the time. And we don't know how long quite a while is. Mork says this is awful. Mommy's not coming home for a while. He and Mirth will be plagued by relatives bringing them strange casseroles like Tomato Delight. I don't know who these relatives would be, but playing on the thing of when somebody dies or family is in crisis where neighbors and relatives will bring food to comfort them. And so they don't have to cook as much. Considering the strange foods that Mork likes, I don't really think Tomato Delight is that odd. Mirth puts one hand on Fred's leg and says he's like Daddy, and that he's real sorry about that. Then he smiles and says, "But take some extra green. Looks like you lose again." They not only bet on whether or not Mork could get his driver's license, but they bet on whether Mindy would get out of jail. Fred shakes his head and takes out some money, which he hands to Mirth. There's an overhead shot of Mindy lying on her bunk playing the harmonica badly. The matron lets Mork into the hallway. He tells the matron it's amazing, 9 days and she hasn't improved at all. The matron shrugs, like she's used to hearing bad harmonica playing. This is the first indication of how much time has passed. And we can see that Louise Bailey is gone, and at the moment, Mindy doesn't have any cellmate. Mindy goes over to the bars, and Mork calls her honey. The matron exits. Mindy tells Mork she doesn't think she can stand it another day. He calls her darling and says he has a plan so she can say goodbye to the bars, communal showers, and the mystery meat. So one of the references to the bad food in jail, although at least they're not eating Tomato Delight. His plan is that she should tell the name of her informant. She's upset and says no, she's not going to do that. He suggests that she tell him and he'll spill her guts for her.
Lord, you know how I feel about freedom of the press? This is a basic constitutional question.
Oh, you mean like how Strom Thurmond keeps having children?
What I did in here. Easy, sister. I'm going to have to show you a few tricks I learned in the roller derby.
Oh, man, come on now. You gotta come home. I mean, I can't bear the thought of you sleeping on anything that doesn't have a dust ruffle.
Oh, believe me, I want to go home. Oh, Mork, it's not easy for me here. When I go out in the exercise yard, the other prisoners giggle when I shoot baskets. I have to cut my meat with a spoon, and frankly, the screws here aren't very nice. Move it, sister, you're on my bunk. Do you believe I said that to her? That woman would kill me for my lunch.
Oh, are they that good here?
This is very in character for Mindy. Even though it is hard for her to stay in jail, she has her principles and she's trying to live by them. Senator Strom Thurmond was then 79. He would actually die in 2003 at the age of 100. His daughter Nancy was born in 71. His son James Strom Thurmond Jr. was born in 72. His daughter Juliana was born in 74. And his son Paul was born in 76. So yes, he was very elderly. when those children were born. We find out after his death, and so of course was unknown at the time of this episode, his first child was actually born in 1925. Her mother was a 16-year-old African-American girl who worked as a servant for his parents, and of course he was well known as a segregationist. But yes, quite an age difference from the children that he acknowledged during his lifetime. There's a reference to the matron being in a roller derby, which sounds like a throwaway line, but there's actually a payoff later. The inmate who comes in is African American. She doesn't have any lines. I don't know if we're supposed to factor in her race as part of why she's threatening or if it's her build. I don't know if it's intentionally racist, but it's mainly there to show that Mindy is scared of this woman, but she does get tough with her when she says the thing about being killed for her lunch. Mork wonders if the lunches are good there, which contradicts what he said about mystery meat, but whatever. Mork says he's not just going to sit down and let her rot in here. He's going to try to do something. Mindy doesn't know what he can do because it's so complicated he wouldn't know where to start. He says it doesn't matter. He's going to go to the Capitol and start knocking on doors until someone listens. He's going to work through the system. And luckily the capital of Colorado is Denver, so that's only half an hour away, and as we learned, Mork now has his driver's license, so he can get there pretty easily. We get a daytime exterior of the Capitol building. If you look, you can see an engraving that says that it's erected by the people, city, and county of Denver. That was what I was saying, where they did bother to go on location for that shot or used a stock shot, but at least it's not a Boulder jail with palm trees. Mork in voiceover says he's gone through enough red tape to gift wrap the Kremlin. Wasn't sure why the Kremlin, other than I guess red is associated with Russia. We see the interior of a small office, and the most important prop here is a portrait of a man in a suit. The politician in the room is also in a three-piece suit. Mork is dressed up to the level that he's wearing his red bow tie. They don't say the name of the politician, but in the credits he's listed as George Logan. I'll just mention right now that he's played by Philip R. Allen, who was then 50. His earliest role was an unconfirmed part in One Naked Night in 1965, and his last role was Richard Mansfield in, I don't know how to pronounce this, London Sissy in 2009. He died in 2012. I most know him for his appearances on The Bob Newhart Show and Bosom Buddies, where he played two different psychologists who chewed gum. And not only don't they tell us his name in the episode itself, they don't say what office he holds. He asks how he can help Mork. Mork says that his wife is a journalist and she refuses to give her sources, so the judge found her in contempt. He says she's been in stir for 9 days and they haven't even taught her a trade, so the cliche of learning a trade while you're in jail. We had heard in the previous scene that it had been 9 days, so maybe that was the morning and now this is late afternoon and he's been going around talking to different people in Denver. Logan says that's an outrage, and then he offers Mork some coffee. Mork says, oh no, thank you. He says he's not alone in this. He has a petition here signed by all 17 members of Miss LaPon's intermediate tap class. I didn't know if this was like a tap class that Mork or Mindy or maybe Mirth had been enrolled in, or it was just the easiest group that Mork could get signatures from. He hands the petition to Logan. Logan says he would like to thank Mork for his time and trouble to bring this problem to his attention. He sets down the petition, shakes Mork's hand, and says before Mork goes, he'd like to give him one of his souvenir pens. He takes it out of his jacket pocket. So clearly he's not going to give Mork a full hearing. Mork says if he wanted a pen and coffee, he would have mugged a waitress, which is kind of a funny line, despite the violence of it. He says he doesn't need any more pens. He's got pens coming out the Clarn here. And he takes out a bunch of them. I think we've had a reference to Clarn before. It's obviously some organ body part.
Look at that. And look at this one here. Here's a Ronald Reagan pen. It's got no point. Come on now.
This is another joke the audience really likes. It's just Reagan bashing, it's not anything specific. Just even insulting the president is fun. Logan cracks a smile, and I'm not sure if that's in character or if it's just Philip R. Allen being amused. Mork says that Logan is an elected official. He's got to help people. He's got to do more than open supermarkets and have mediocre-looking daughters. Kind of harsh. He says there's got to be something that Logan can do. Logan looks serious but not offended. He says the only viable solution is a shield law. Mork asks if that's the law which forces women to wear little pads to protect their delicate dresses. He gestures at his underarms, so I have to confess, this is one of the few things I remember about this episode, is I was 14 and I was super embarrassed by that line because I thought he was talking about panty liners. I didn't know what dress shields were. Logan is now sitting in the swivel chair holding a pen. He says, no, a shield law protects a journalist from having divulged their sources. And I thought it was interesting he did use the gender-neutral term there. He says 26 states have some sort of shield law, but Colorado doesn't. However, they don't have our Mile High taffy. I never heard of this before, but apparently Mile High HI is a store in Denver. I don't know if that was the same company back then, but it does exist. As for the shield law, in 1990, the Colorado General Assembly did actually pass a shield law. Probably not inspired by this episode, but that is progress. Mork suggests a campaign for Logan. Free the Shiksa One, like the Chicago 7. And yes, he's again calling Mindy a Shiksa. Mork thinks this will work, and in no time at all, Mindy will be back home changing the old vacuum bag. Again, does Mork miss Mindy because of who she is or because of the housework she does? Because on the previous episode, he said that without her, he'd just be another alien who had to do his own laundry. Logan says he knows what he can do. Of course, this is going to take time. This isn't Photomat, referring to the little booths where you would drop off your photos and then pick them up later. And I had a Pam Dauber Photomat commercial in one of my previous pods. Logan says he'll have to draft a bill, push it through the right channels. He won't take a Christmas vacation. So if the neighbor still hasn't taken down his Christmas lights, and this is maybe March or April, we already know that it's going to be a long time until Logan has a Christmas vacation. But Mork doesn't seem to mind that, and he says bless you, and I noticed that he says bless you a few times in this episode, which is odd if you think about Mork's relationship to religion.
Oh, ram this thing right
Oh, ram it home.
Yes, sir. And you know what? She'll probably be out in about 2 or 3 years.
2 or 3 years? By that time, Brooke Shields' eyebrows would have met.
Hey, listen.
They use sort of violent imagery of ramming through legislation, but even then, Mindy won't be out for another 2 or 3 years. There's another line that the audience really likes, in this case about Brooke Shields' eyebrows. She's come up on a different episode before, and at the time she was very well known as a teen model and actress who nonetheless had large eyebrows, and I was surprised that they didn't tie in the Brooke Shields joke with the Shields law. And we can see here that Philip R. Allen is trained not to laugh. Logan stands and says that's not so bad. It took him 2 full terms just to get this swivel chair. 2 full terms as what? I don't know. Mork stutters about Logan not being able to get Mork's wife out of jail. Logan says no, he can't, but his father could have, and he points at the portrait. I expected some sort of follow-up line or some establishing line. It's just, okay, his father had the same position years ago, but he's not the man his father was. Hinted backstory, and it's just there. Logan says he's sorry. It's not that he doesn't care, it's just, well, he doesn't want to make waves. So I thought that was interesting that he's confessing this to Mork. He's not a smooth-talking politician. He did try and palm Mork off with coffee and pens, but he does care. He just can't do anything about it. Mork angrily says that politicians are all alike. He should have known better. This is from the same system that gave us Spiro Agnew. First Agnew reference in a while. He opens the door and then tweaks his own nose with a sound effect, and then he exits. There's another daytime exterior of the jail with the palm tree. Mindy is alone in her cell again doing the jigsaw. So I don't know what happened to the African-American cellmate. We never found out her name or anything about her. She's just gone. Mork sings happy birthday and he wheels in a cake shaped like a saw with happy birthday pooter on it. He's wearing a party hat, as is the smiling matron. Mindy says it's not her birthday. We haven't really had her birthday since the first season, so who knows. She asks what Mork is doing. Mork tells the matron, oh, will he listen to her? She's so shy. She lies about her age and her SAT score. Well, we do know she's inconsistent about her age, but that's more the fault of the writers. I don't know in which direction she's lying about her SAT score. She's being modest, or she's exaggerating it. The matron tells Mindy, you know, you got a funny little man here, which is true. She's very amused about the cake in the shape of a saw, and that's the old cliche of smuggling in a saw inside a cake or other food so that the prisoner can saw their way through the bars. The matron laughs and playfully punches Mork, who crashes into the bars. Mork confides to Mindy to play along. They're making their own laws here, just like in Haiti. This would have been during the presidency of Baby Doc Duvalier, I hope I pronounced that right, who was the son of Papa Doc Duvalier. Papa Doc had harsh policies which his son somewhat modified, but the economy was slowing down, and it looks like demonstrations started in 1985, so a few years after this episode. Mindy tells Mork whatever he's up to, please don't. And he ignores her, and he tells the matron that Mindy is going to perk up so much when they make those little balloon animals. And of course he didn't bring in any balloons. As the matron unlocks the cell door, she says, oh good, they haven't had a party here since the police chief had his heart attack. I don't know what's going on in this jail. It's very weird. They have different kinds of criminals in prison together and very lax guards. She rolls back the cell door. Mork wheels in the cake saying, party! Woo!
Well, Min, well, I saw this cake. It's the best one I'd seen, bar none. Hope it doesn't make you break out. Break out. Well, make a wish, hon.
I did, but you're probably going through with this anyway.
Oh, a couple of weeks without her water pick, and she still hasn't lost her spirit.
Well, time to cut the cake.
Yeah. Oh, but there's no tradition that the birthday girl gets to cut the cake.
Well, we have a little tradition here, too. Prisoners with knives get shot on sight.
Oh.
I want my piece of cake now.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
What kind of filling is that?
Well, I asked for rum raisin.
The matron is oblivious to Mork's puns about breaking out, but she's not stupid. She does catch on when there's an actual saw inside the cake. Mork refers to Mindy spending a couple of weeks without her water pick to clean her teeth, and so I don't know if maybe a few days have gone by since it was 9 days. The matron, of course, is not going to let Mindy have a knife. When she takes out the saw, it's surprisingly clean. I mean, you would think they would just have more cake on it. As the matron wipes her hands on the towel hanging from the cart, Mork says he's going to call his consumer advocate about this, meaning that they ripped off the cake. He wheels the cake out and says, what a bummer. The matron tells him to wait. She locks up the cell and leaves, and she asks Mindy if she really married that guy, or is she just breaking him in for somebody else? I guess she's amused by Mork, but you can also see how he'd be difficult to be married to. The matron tells Mork to come back, and she goes after him, shutting the outer door behind her. Mindy wearily returns to her bunk. Then Mork's face appears at the window. I don't know how he got from, I guess, the waiting room of the police station or jail. I'm not sure what the setup is. And then he got outside and got to the alley. You can see that there's a brick wall with some graffiti on it. He hisses at Mindy to get her attention. She looks startled and then annoyed. She goes over the window. He tells her to hop on the Midnight Express. I assume this is a reference to the 1978 prison drama, Midnight Express. Mindy wants Mork to stop this right now. She's made it clear what she wants, and he continues to ignore her. He says that he needs her. Mirth needs her. Besides, they've got tickets to see Sophisticated Ladies. This was a Broadway musical that ran from 1981 to 83. It was based on the music of Duke Ellington and earned 2 Tony Awards. So it would have been a very hot ticket if it had come to Boulder at that time. Mindy tells him no, and then he says that it's clam night at Howard Johnson's. I've never actually eaten at Howard Johnson's, but I know that their clam dish was a big deal, and the reason why I know that is because of the book The Clam Plate Orgy by Wilson Bryan Key, which talks about subliminal messages. Mork pleads with Mindy a bit more, and then he tells her to stand back. She tells him to put that finger down, so she knows that he's going to do something with his powers to try and get her out of there. So we see some special effects, and the audience has a delayed reaction. I'm not sure exactly how they did this in front of them. Maybe they showed them special effects on the screen or just told them react like you've just seen this. And we can see that the outside of this wall also has some graffiti on it. Mork says his car is outside and the engine's running. So apparently he not only got his license, but they bought a second car for Mork to drive, which makes sense. That was part of the plan, but it just all happened pretty quickly considering she's in jail and probably not earning any money right now. He says she doesn't want to miss clam night. She tells him it's against the law to break people out of jail. And you'd think that he would have learned that when he was in jail back in the first season. He says, so is dancing with sheep, but people still do it, and he dances a bit while doing weird humming. She admits that she wants to go with him, but she can't. She goes over to sit on the bench and says that this is her one chance to prove that her beliefs are more than just words. She says her mind's made up, and she's not going anywhere. She's staying here. He asks if she's the same woman who broke the Pritikin diet after only 3 hours. The Pritikin diet was the subject of a 1979 bestseller by Nathan Pritikin, based around high fiber and limiting meat, alcohol, and processed foods. So we don't know how she broke it, but she didn't last very long. She says yes, but that's different. Sometimes you have to make sacrifices for your principles.
Oh, come on, you see that, don't you?
Oh, no. No, come on, minutes. Oh, no.
All right, freeze, Shrimp.
You boys play handball someplace else.
No, it's not going to work.
No.
You're under arrest.
Oh, please.
No, wait, this is a mistake. This is a misunderstanding. Come on, where's your sense of humor?
Well, listen, woman, we'll look at the good side. I mean, I'm here, you're here, and if they get Mirth on a juvenile rap, we'll be a happy family again.
You could have saved yourself the trouble. Pollyanna here has been released. Your source finally spilled the beans. You're kidding, I'm free! Oh, God, I can't wait to get out of here.
Oh, but men, well, you ex-cons are so insensitive. Men, what about me?
Come on, Toots, let's move it.
Oh, men, you can't leave me in here. You know what happens to a pretty face in jail.
I'm going to go straight home and call the lawyer, all right?
All right.
Okay, I'll call. Oh, you might need this.
Oh, all right.
Oh, and don't eat the macaroni, it's bad.
Yaddy, yaddy! Wait a minute. What am I feeling sorry about? There's no jail in this town that can hold me on clam night. Souvenir. Born free.
All those years in the roller derby, I knew I should have worn a helmet.
We can see that he's torn because he's saying no, but he's nodding. The matron comes back and, of course, sees him in the cell and the wall broken, and she calls him Shrimp. So again, she's commenting on his height, like when she called him Shorty. Mork's idea of looking on the bright side in this case is that maybe Mirth will be arrested on a juvenile charge and then they'll be reunited, although you would think that the courts wouldn't treat Mirth as a juvenile because he looks like a 50-year-old man. The matron calls Mindy Pollyanna, meaning that she's very optimistic. And again, this is like when they call Mindy Perky. It actually doesn't fit. I think it's meant to say that Mindy's kind of innocent compared to other prisoners. And she again calls her Toots. Then we get an implied rape joke when Mork says, you know what happens to a pretty face in jail. Mindy says that she's going to call the lawyer, so another mention of her lawyer. Of course, she passes on the harmonica, and she says that the macaroni is bad. So I guess it's not the mystery meat you need to worry about, it's the macaroni. The audience, of course, really likes Mork doing the blues, and Mork again says that he's going to miss clam night. And then he realizes that he can use his powers. I wondered if the door raising was a reversal of when it fell, but maybe not. And Mork refers to Born Free, the song and the movie from the 60s, and again that theme of freedom. And then we get sort of the payoff where the matron again refers to the roller derby and how she should have worn a helmet. The older looking cop that comes with her doesn't have any lines, so he's not in the credits. But I think it was just so that she would have somebody to bring back with her to tell about the prisoner's husband. And then the husband is gone.
This is Newsline, and I'm Mindy McConnell. Heavy rains today bring flash flood warnings to Colgate County. Today, Denver Gazette reporter Judd Smith was cited for contempt and jailed for refusing to reveal his news sources in the Arvada kickback trial. In a related story, a bill to provide a shield law for journalists died in committee. And the manhunt continues for escaped pantyhose strangler Louise Bailey. Details at 10.
Instead of a tag that's a report to Orson, we get Mindy in the studio. This time the exterior of the studio shows her Jeep parked out front. So it's a sign that everything's okay, charges have been dropped, she's back at her job, and so now she's the one doing the newsline. There's a reference to Colgate County, but I don't think there is a Colgate in Colorado. The policeman that we see in the still with the character named Judd Smith might be the cop from the previous scene. I have no idea who Judd Smith is, either who plays him or anything else about him. I think it's just to show that this is happening a lot locally. Journalists are refusing to name their sources and they're being arrested for it. And we find out the Shield law died in committee, so that's kind of sad. Logan apparently did try and put it forward, but it didn't go. We do get sort of closure about Louise Bailey, that she's the escaped pantyhose strangler. So she was not in the jail cell because she broke out somehow. So again, they're pretty lax. She's of course smiling sweetly in her shot, so still that nice Mrs. Cleaver image. And Mindy says that there will be details at 10, just like in the previous newsline. And I think that it come up on the Metamorphosis episode that their news is at 10 sometimes. I rate each Mork Mindy episode on a 0 to 4 egg scale, which measures how well it delivers what I'm looking for in the series. And I watched this the first time through today and thought, yeah, it's better than some we've been getting lately. I guess it's a 2 3/4. But it won me over. There are plot holes and odd timelines and threads that are just kind of thrown in there or not expanded on, and there's a few regrettable jokes. But maybe it was the studio audience was just having so much fun with it, and I did enjoy the guest stars for the most part. So I'm good with a 3 out of 4. It's actually one of the more entertaining episodes of this season. And on a more serious note, I did like that it focused on Mindy to the degree that it did. It was a reminder of how important her career is to her and her ideals, and how even though she may come across as a little bit privileged or spoiled or sheltered, she is going to stick to what she believes in. Mork doesn't really get that, but kind of does in the end, and so I like that. I will say that Mirth was pretty much a brat even when it wasn't necessary, but somehow it didn't bother me as much as it does in some episodes, maybe just because it wasn't the focus. It is nice to get some closure on Mork having his license, so that was good. Interesting use of Fred, where he understands and supports Mindy, but he's also a worried father, so that was good. And yeah, Pam Dauber gets a lot to work with. It was fun but thought-provoking, and for all its flaws, I think it's worth the ride. I also rate each of these episodes on a 0 to 4 heart scale, which measures how well it supports and promotes the romantic relationship of Mork and Mindy. And this is an odd one because Mork and Mindy aren't spending much time together. When they are, it's when he's visiting her, and they're not conjugal visits. But he is working for her release. He is trying to come up with schemes. The one with going to visit whatever official Philip R. Allen is playing didn't really work out, but at least he tried. But I wish he had listened more to what she wanted. And obviously there's not much kissing or hugging or hand-holding or anything like that. So I'm good with a 1.5. It's not as little as we've had in some episodes, but it just didn't really support that. And again, this thing of he misses her, but part of why he misses her is because of housework. It's like, it's not romantic. And as far as whether this is a skippable episode, definitely not. Especially if you are interested in Mindy's arc. You need to see this. And also, ironically, this would be the last regular episode. The next 3 do something crazy. And then the final episode is its own thing. This is still somewhat grounded in what passes for reality on Mork and Mindy. And the thing of the reporter protecting their sources is kind of a cliche for any series that has a journalist character on it. I thought there must be a Mary Tyler Moore episode about this, and so I double-checked, and it's helpfully called Will Mary Richards Go to Jail? And this aired in September 1974. The IMDb synopsis is, Mary refuses to name a source covers for her news story and ends up in jail. I haven't seen it in a very long time, but I think it's a similar thing where she's sort of out of place in jail, but she stands by her beliefs. But yes, here they're doing it with the Mork and Mindy slant, where every time Mindy has a problem, it sort of becomes about how Mork deals with it, but Mindy's role in it is important. So yeah, I think it is worth watching this episode. I kind of wish it had gone through another couple drafts to prune away some of the lines that don't really go anywhere or hint at something that's not developed. But on the other hand, like I said, I find that kind of charming in this case. I didn't mind that in the same way, because it's sort of like the Gene Rayburn joke, where it's so random that that in itself is kind of entertaining. 3 eggs, 1.5 hearts. This is Paula Schaffner with Cheerleader in Chains.